There are moments in life when everything you've ever learned, everything you've ever survived, converges into a single instant. 3 seconds. That's all I had. 3 seconds to decide between freezing in fear or acting on instinct. 3 seconds between life and death. That night in the pediatric emergency room, I faced a decorated Marine in the middle of a violent breakdown, a weapon in his hand, and an 8-year-old boy lying helpless on a gurney just feet away. What I did next defied every protocol, every rule, every ounce of common sense, but it saved 2 lives, and it forced me to confront a past I thought I'd buried forever. My name is Lauren Fitzgerald, and this is my story. I've been a pediatric nurse for 12 years now, working at Mercy General Hospital in San Diego, California. The emergency department here is unlike anywhere else. We see everything: car accidents, sports injuries, sudden illnesses, frightened parents, crying children. The chaos is constant, relentless, but I thrive in it. Maybe it's because I grew up surrounded by discipline and unpredictability. My father was a staff sergeant in the United States Army, stationed at Fort Hood in Texas for most of my childhood. Life on a military base teaches you things civilians never learn: how to stay calm when sirens blare, how to assess danger instantly, how to act when everyone else freezes. My dad trained me and my brother in basic self-defense from the time we were 10 years old. He'd say, "Lauren, the world won't wait for you to be ready. You prepare now, or you regret it later." I never imagined those lessons would one day save a child's life, but they did. And that night changed everything. If this story has already pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will surprise you even more. And I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below. Let's connect. Growing up at Fort Hood wasn't easy. My brother, Michael, and I were military kids through and through. We moved every few years, learned to make friends fast and say goodbye faster. But the hardest part wasn't the moving. It was watching my dad come home from deployments changed, quieter, carrying weight he'd never talk about. My mom held the family together, but even she couldn't always reach him. When I was 15, something happened that shattered my sense of safety. A family friend, another soldier, had a breakdown at a barbecue on base. He'd just returned from Iraq. One moment he was laughing, the next he was on the ground, reliving an ambush, screaming orders at invisible enemies. My dad and 2 other men had to restrain him. I watched, frozen, as this man I'd known my whole life became someone unrecognizable. That image never left me. Neither did the helplessness I felt, so I made a promise to myself. I would never be powerless again. I took every self-defense class offered on base: Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, hand-to-hand combat techniques. I learned how to disarm, how to control, how to protect, and years later, in a pediatric emergency room, those skills would be put to the ultimate test. Thank you for staying with me up to this point. It shows that you feel the same thing I felt when I lived through all of this. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what comes now changes everything. It was a Friday night in late September. The emergency department was slammed. We had a teenager with a suspected appendicitis, a toddler with a severe asthma attack, and a steady stream of minor injuries. Around 9:30, paramedics rushed in with an 8-year-old boy named Connor. He'd been hit by a car while riding his bike, fractured ribs, possible internal bleeding, unconscious. We moved fast, getting him stabilized, calling for imaging, prepping for possible surgery. His parents arrived minutes later, hysterical, barely able to stand. I held his mother's hand and promised we'd do everything we could. That's when I heard the commotion at the entrance, shouting, security guards yelling for someone to stop. Then I saw him. A man, mid-30s, muscular, wearing a faded Marine Corps shirt and cargo pants. His eyes were wild, unfocused. He was sweating, breathing hard, and in his right hand, he held a gun. The entire emergency room went silent for a split second before chaos erupted. Parents grabbed their children. Nurses ducked behind counters. One of the security guards reached for his radio, but the man shouted, "Don't move! Don't any of you move!" His voice cracked with desperation and rage. And then I realized with horror he was walking straight toward Connor's gurney. In time slowed. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The Marine was maybe 20 feet away from Connor, moving erratically, muttering to himself, "Where are they? Where's the target? I need to secure the perimeter." He wasn't seeing the hospital. He was somewhere else, somewhere terrifying. The 2 security guards positioned themselves between the man and the rest of the room, but neither dared approach. One whispered into his radio, calling for police backup. But backup would take minutes. We had seconds. Connor's mother screamed, "Please, don't hurt my baby." The sound seemed to trigger something in the Marine. He spun toward her, raising the weapon. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I stepped forward instinctively, my hands raised. "Hey," I said, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through me. "Hey, look at me. You're safe. You're home." He turned toward me, and for a brief moment our eyes met. I saw confusion, pain, and something else. Recognition. Not of me, but of the tone in my voice, the calm, authoritative tone my father used to use. "You're not in danger," I continued, taking a small step closer. "You're in a hospital. You're in San Diego. The mission is over. You're home." His hand wavered, but then his gaze drifted back to Connor, and his face twisted in anguish. "I have to protect him," he muttered. "I couldn't protect them before. I have to protect him." I kept moving slowly, every muscle in my body coiled and ready. "You're right," I said softly. "You need to protect him. And you know what? So do I. We're on the same team here. You and me. We're both trying to keep this kid safe." He looked at me again, searching my face for something. Trust, maybe, or absolution. "I failed them," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I failed my unit. They died because of me." My heart clenched. I knew that guilt. I'd seen it in my father's eyes. I'd seen it in Michael's eyes before he died. "You didn't fail anyone," I said firmly. "You did your best. And you survived. That means something. That means you're still here to make a difference." For a moment, I thought I was getting through to him. His shoulders sagged slightly, and the weapon lowered a few inches. But then a monitor near Connor's bed beeped loudly, and the Marine's entire body tensed. His eyes snapped back to the gurney. "Incoming!" he shouted. "We've got incoming! Everyone down!" He raised the gun again, this time aiming it directly at the space near Connor. Parents screamed. Nurses dove for cover. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had no more time. If I didn't act now, that child would die. Now I want to know from you. Where are you watching this story from? Write it down in the comments. It's incredible to see people from so many places following stories like this. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because this journey is just beginning. Everything my father taught me, everything I'd practiced for years, came flooding back in an instant. I closed the distance between us in 3 quick steps. His attention was fixed on the gurney, his finger tightening on the trigger. I didn't think. I acted. My left hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, twisting it sharply downward in a classic Krav Maga disarm. At the same time, I stepped in close, using my body weight to off-balance him. His grip on the weapon loosened for just a fraction of a second, and I drove my right palm up into the underside of the gun, forcing it toward the ceiling. The gun discharged. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Someone screamed, but the bullet went harmlessly into the ceiling tiles. I followed through, torquing his wrist harder, stepping behind him, and using a joint lock to force him down to his knees. The gun clattered to the floor. I kicked it away. He struggled, but I maintained the lock, applying just enough pressure to control him without causing serious injury. "It's over," I said into his ear, my voice shaking but firm. "The fight is over. You're safe. Stand down, Marine. Stand down." And then, something incredible happened. He stopped fighting. His body went limp, and a choked sob escaped his throat. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I'm so sorry." I eased the pressure on his arm and lowered him gently to the ground. The security guards rushed in, but I stayed with him, kneeling beside him. I took his face in my hands and looked him in the eyes. "You're home," I whispered. "The war is over. You're safe." Tears streamed down his face. He nodded, still sobbing. The next few minutes were a blur. The security guards cuffed the Marine gently, and paramedics sedated him. Police arrived and took statements. Connor's parents clung to each other, crying in relief, and I just stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. My supervisor pulled me aside, her face pale. "Lauren, that was the most reckless, dangerous thing I've ever seen. You could have been killed." I nodded. "I know, but I wasn't." She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. "You saved that kid's life. You know that, right?" I didn't answer. All I could think about was the Marine's face, the anguish, the guilt. It was a face I'd seen before. In the weeks that followed, I became a local news story. Hospital hero nurse disarms veteran in crisis. The security footage went viral. People called me brave, fearless, a hero. But I didn't feel like any of those things. I felt exhausted and haunted. Because when I looked at that Marine, I didn't just see a stranger. I saw my brother Michael. Michael had enlisted in the Army right out of high school, following in our father's footsteps. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan. When he came home, he wasn't the same. He struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, anger he couldn't control. And one night, 6 years ago, he took his own life. I never got to save him. But that night in the emergency room, I saved someone just like him. The Connor made a full recovery. His parents sent me a card with a photo of him smiling, back on his bike, wearing a helmet this time. It sits on my desk at work, a reminder of why I do what I do. But the story didn't end there. 2 months after the incident, I received a call from a psychiatrist at the Veterans Affairs Hospital. The Marine's name was David Hernandez. He was a decorated combat veteran, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. He'd been struggling with severe PTSD for years, self-medicating. avoiding treatment. The night he came into my emergency room, he'd been off his medication for weeks and had suffered a complete psychotic break. He didn't even remember most of what happened, but he wanted to meet me. I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. The thought terrified me. What would I even say? But something deeper pulled me toward that meeting. Maybe it was the need for closure, or maybe it was the hope that, through him, I could find some peace for Michael. We met in a private room at the VA hospital. David was smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his eyes red from crying. "I don't know how to apologize for what I did," he said quietly. "I endangered your life. I endangered a child. I'm so ashamed." I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap. "You were sick," I said. "You weren't yourself." He shook his head. "That's what everyone keeps saying, but it was still me. I'm still responsible." We talked for over an hour. He told me about his deployments, the friends he'd lost, the guilt that consumed him. He told me about the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the feeling that he was never truly safe. And I told him about Michael, about how I'd watched my brother struggle and felt helpless to save him, about the anger I carried toward myself for not doing more. "You can't save everyone," David said quietly. "I've had to learn that the hardest way possible." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "But I saved you, and you saved me too, in a way." He looked at me, confused. "How?" "Because you're still here. You're getting help. You're fighting. And that gives me hope that Michael's story didn't have to be the only ending." Before I left, David thanked me again, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just stop me that night. You saw me. You saw the person I still was underneath all the pain, and that's why I'm still alive." I hugged him, and we both cried. Today, David is in ongoing treatment. He's been sober for 8 months. He volunteers at a veterans outreach program, helping others who are struggling, and we stay in touch. Every few weeks he sends me a text, just to check in, just to remind me that healing is possible. I still work in the same pediatric emergency department at Mercy General Hospital. Connor's photo is still on my desk, alongside one of Michael in his uniform. Every day I walk into that building, I think about the fine line between life and death, between despair and hope. Being a nurse isn't just about administering medication or monitoring vital signs. It's about seeing people in their most vulnerable moments and choosing, every single time, to fight for them. After that night, I started teaching self-defense and de-escalation workshops for healthcare workers. I want others to feel prepared, not powerless. I want them to know that in those critical seconds, when everything is falling apart, you can still make a choice. You can still act. And sometimes, that action saves more than one life. That night, I saved Connor. I saved David. But in many ways, I also saved myself. I let go of the guilt I carried over Michael. I forgave myself for not being able to fix everything. And I learned that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear, because someone's life depends on it. So I keep showing up. I keep fighting, and I keep believing that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for light. And thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. It means more than you know. Now I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stepped forward, or would fear have held you back? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel something real, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week I bring you true stories from nurses who faced the impossible and came out the other side. And trust me, the next one will surprise you even more. Until then, take care of yourselves and remember, you're stronger than you think.